So say you found the skeleton. How would you tell if it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to Dapper Reacts to Things, episode 5, of course, with Vishanti.
What's up?
All right, so guys, this is us reacting to a video called Geologic Bias versus the Witness of Fossils, in which we're being told how fossils completely destroy the millions of years of age of the Earth, which is really billions, but whatever, don't worry about that, as well as evolution, despite the fact that they absolutely do no such thing.
They would on opposite day.
Well, that's true. But I don't think today is opposite day. Although if it were, you would have to tell me that it isn't. So opposite day is one of those tricky things.
I would also like to say, apropos of nothing, that Cracker Barrel sharp, like extra sharp cheese is freaking delicious.
Oh, and we, of course, have a super chat that came in before we started from Valkyrie Vision, who has been, by the way, trying to get the super chats to work. And she says, if this worked, I'm pretty excited. I just have to turn turn voiceover off and then poke around randomly until the keyboard comes up. Yeah, that sounds difficult. I'm glad you figured it out, though. My guess is that YouTube was not thinking very much about accessibility for the visually impaired for super chats, which is too bad. They should have a team in charge of that. Like, I feel like when you're as big as Google, you should have an accessibility team.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe they do, and there's always going to be oversights or something. I guess that's also the case, right? Like, probably never going to be perfect. So, still though, Google, get on it. Make a visual impaired accessibility for super chats a higher priority. Let's see. Because, you know, Google, blind people's money spends just the same. You want their money too. Right? Okay, so I will also want to say that I know that the last few streams we've been having some pretty serious disconnect problems. I have switched ingest servers to the legacy ingest server. I have also reconfigured how my computer is going to handle disconnects if they occur. Hopefully mean that rather than having, you know, roughly a third of this be lost due to random disconnects, we'll have more like 0.5% lost due to random disconnects, which I find to be an acceptable loss rate. I don't know about you, Vishanti. What do you think?
Well, it's more acceptable than the previous.
Yeah. So you guys might miss out on like 4 seconds or so of this, hopefully, if everything goes as it went last time.
We just have to be sure that we don't give away the secrets to life, the universe, and everything in those 4 seconds.
Well, we can give away the secrets, just not the question.
Okay.
We're going to keep going with this. We've just been told how there are no transitional forms between snakes and other lizards, or between turtles and, you know, basal sauropsids, which, in both cases, no, that's not true. In fact, found plenty.
And same as the snakes. Both of these create problems for evolutionists. Well, I could go on and on. Critics, scorpions, and flies are all the same.
I mean, that fly first does not look very much like the fly at the bottom.
Well, if you squint, like, you know, flatten out the legs there.
But of course, we also do have, let's see. We do have things that link scorpions to other arachnids. But one of the things about scorpions is that scorpions are basically, other than the claws, sort of like the most generic arachnid. So it's sort of like, what would you expect as the great transitional? Because basically you would say, well, a pointier tail, it doesn't, like, it just goes straight back, and like smaller claws, I guess? So like, okay, but we already saw it last time with Attercopus that we actually do have transitional groups among all of the various arachnids. So like,
Would a transitional form of scorpion have big, meaty claws?
No, probably not. Probably have thin claws, which actually is what we're seeing in the scorpion that they have up here. The amber scorpion. But also, of course, we don't know when this amber is from, right? Like, it's interesting because at no point are we like, oh, this is a, you know, like a Devonian scorpion. Oh, some people are getting a...
No way are we buffering or whatever already.
I'm trying to keep an eye on it. I didn't see it go out, but maybe it did.
Ugh.
It's not buffering on my end, so I don't know. Anyway, yeah, so there's a number of things. It's like, where are these from? Are these from, like, 20-million-year-old amber? Are they from 400-million-year? Well, not 400. 300-million-year-old amber? Well, looks like not everyone had buffering, so it wasn't on my end. So take that. 2 people who had buffering. And then crickets. Are there proto-crickets? I don't actually know. You can tell that this is not something that I've watched before because, like, I don't actually have any of this stuff handy.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Click on cricket transitional form, and it just gives you stuff about crickets. Cricket, like the sport. It's like, that doesn't really help me very much there.
Why'd you name a sport after an animal? Gosh.
Yeah, that's a good question. Oh. You know what? I'm going to continue on and say, I actually don't know if we have a great record for the transitional nature of crickets going back to other insects. Maybe we don't. But like I've said, the fact that we don't for some organisms doesn't really mean that the ones that we do have don't count. Right? So it's sort of like, if you have transitional series that are great for, like, Neoceratopsians, for cetaceans, for hominins, or birds, or dinosaurs as a whole, for turtles, for all these other organisms. But then you're like, aha, including spiders, by the way, which we already showed. Aha, but what about crickets? It's like, okay, great. Here's one where we don't really... I don't know what to tell you. That the fossil record isn't going to be even.
I have you now.
Right? It's just Dr. Banjo. Like, it's just the Dr. Banjo thing, except going from one lineage to another instead of sticking with one lineage. Vandalia 1998, there we go, for one, I can't speak, for $9.99 US, there we go. Says, if anyone wants to double dip on YouTube, I'm talking to Venerable Bede on my channel right now about Anglo-Saxon invasion of England. Well, I hope I'm not boring, but that does actually sound like an interesting question, because Venerable Bede, being the author of the first ever history of the English, ecclesiastical history of the English people, probably knows a fair bit about the Anglo-Saxons. Also, apparently, despite the name the Venerable Bede, I guess he was actually canonized by the Catholic Church, so for Catholics he's now like Saint Bede, which is weird because the Venerable Bede is actually like a Catholic title where, like, haven't actually been canonized, but the Catholic Church has said that it's acceptable to venerate this person, but you can't do it as part of a church service. You can go do it on your own privately, and that's okay. But the full sainthood comes with canonization when you actually can add in, like, a hymn and a particular feast day officially into the church calendar that can be celebrated in churches during a mass.
Are there feast days that overlap? Like, since there's only like 365 and sometimes 366 days in a year,
yeah.
I'm assuming by now we've got lots of people on.
Yeah, basically, if you look at the Catholic Church, like, feast days of saints, pretty much every day has like 5 or 6 different.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
And usually any given, like, parish isn't going to celebrate all of those every day. They're going to have some that are particularly significant for, like, the congregants or for the history of that church or something. And always, if they're named after a saint, they'll celebrate that saint day, holiday there.
I love Dr. Banjo in the chat. It's got the little orangutan emoji. Aha! I have you now.
All right, here we go.
Well, let me point out something to understand what the big problem is here. The evolutionary interpretation of...
Hey, I've been there.
Me too. I was there not that long ago. That's the Isis Temple, which is one of the more photograph spots. But also, it doesn't actually look a whole lot like a temple. You know?
Nope.
Although I have heard some conspiracy theorists say that it's an actual Egyptian temple because the Egyptians had an empire that spanned the New World. Because look, there's pyramids here, and there's a bit of rock that's called the Isis Temple. It's like, okay, buddy, yeah, sure. That makes sense.
I mean, if that were the case, who would win in a cage match between the Mexica and the Egyptians?
ooh, that's a really tough question, actually.
Like, pick the strongest version of each. Just assume, okay, who would win?
I feel like the Mexica had better body armor overall, but I don't have much to back that up.
I was gonna say it's it's pretty savage to have a Mako wheat as your like battle weapon. That's fairly hardcore.
Oh yeah, those things are vicious. In case you guys don't know, they're
Yeah.
basically wooden clubs. They're set in with what are basically like obsidian or sometimes like shark tooth daggers around the edge, so that it's like a combination like club axe with multiple serrated.
It's metal.
Yeah,
It's metal attack.
like holy crap. It's yeah. So yeah, I don't know. That would be tough because you know the Egyptians had some pretty nice weapons. Like Kopesh is a pretty nice sword.
Yeah.
So yeah, it might be a toss up.
Okay. We're gonna have to put this to the larger community, I think, because I really want to know the answer. I want to know what people would put their money on.
Fair enough. It's a good question.
These layers of rocks is that these different layers of rocks form because the Earth's environments changed over time dramatically. Like first there was a desert there forming one type of sedimentary rock. Then there was a swamp there forming a different type of sedimentary rocks.
Specifically, there was a desert during the Permian and then like a swamp during the Triassic. And before that, there was some shallow water oceans during like, you know, the Cambrian. You know, just in case you want some of the specifics.
Sandstone.
You know what's funny about this guy complaining about the Grand Canyon is that we're actually seeing a very interesting example of sedimentation right now. For those of you that are familiar with Lake Mead, that thing is almost completely dry, and that's bad.
Yeah,
But,
not good. For me, especially.
Because at least 5 different states pull their main water supply from there, but that's beside the point. The fact that it's drying up at astoundingly horrific rates is showing us like exposed sedimentation layers from where the variation of like water levels happen. And my friend, it looks a lot like the Grand Canyon.
Yeah. Also, we have a $5 super chat from I think it's Liege Robert. Let me know exactly how to pronounce that if I get it wrong. Sorry about that. But it's for $5, who says, "Shout out to my blind peeps. I'm low vision PhD student in computer science. Accessibility is never tested enough." I agree. I am not myself blind or deaf or someone who really needs special attention for accessibility, but I know and interact with enough people who are that it's something that, you know, I concern myself with a little bit. Like, hey, am I relying too much on visuals or something in my video? It's one of the reasons why actually the visuals are usually something that I try to make like either as like it's mostly a joke or it's like supplemental. There are a few exceptions where like my transitional possible slideshow, it doesn't really work very well if you're blind, because like a big part of it is like these look transitional, but I don't have a really easy way to do that without just going into like a half an hour anatomical description. But yeah, like stuff like that really is something that I try to stay on top of. Is like, hey, is this accessible to people who, you know, are
Yeah, there's like,
blind or
and
deaf?
there's different levels of accessibility needs because some people are just blue-green colorblind.
Yeah.
Or red-green colorblind, sorry. Some people are like visually impaired to where they need special text readers.
Mhm.
Some people are fully blind. Some people need screen readers for alt text on like photos, which is pretty cool that, you know, Twitter finally got on the train and added alt text options for when you're uploading pictures.
Yeah. Oh,
And it's actually provided a very hilarious example of people using the alt text in thematic ways. Like Jorts the Labor Cat will humorously caption the alt text to match the labor and union positive
speaking of
perspective.
visually impaired inclusion, I really appreciate the Matt Murdock cameo in Spider-Man No Way Home.
Yes.
Yes, that was a lot of fun, and yeah, I hope I see more of like the Defenders crew poking up here and there in the actual movies.
Oh, you will, because Daredevil's getting his own series on Disney Plus. Yep.
Another one,
Yeah.
or is it? I guess it's technically like a continuation.
I mean, if you want me to skip the Hollywood like financial politicking, it technically is a continuation, but the pay rate scale is treating it as if it's a new series, so a lot of people on the original crew are getting screwed over because your contracts are set to bump your pay after 3 seasons to a certain extent.
Of course.
Spoiler alert is why so many Netflix shows get canceled after 3 seasons. And they're really salty because it's being treated as a new series and not season 4.
But are they salty enough to not show up for the work?
There's the thing is Disney's gonna hire other crews. It sucks, like the business. Oh, Lige Robert says it's Lige as in the first syllable of Elijah. What, you mean the second syllable of Elijah?
You know, counting is not important. This is
that's fair.
Dapper Dino, where we give everyone 1 free order of magnitude.
Okay,
which meant
fair.
if he had said it's the 10th syllable in Elijah, which is only a 3-syllable word, it would still be okay.
I would be confused. Or I would think you're from the Deep South, because we're really good at adding syllables to very, very few letter words.
I actually remember, until fairly well into my adulthood, I didn't know that anyone actually said Jesus as like their actual way of saying the name. And then I encountered someone who didn't, and I was like, oh, I guess that's not just a made-up, like, joke. Okay.
Yeah, there's this whole joke about how we add extra syllables to 4-letter words. It is extremely accurate.
All right, we're going to see what else this guy has for us, because we only got 15 minutes, 44 seconds of this guy.
Then shale formed, and then limestone formed when it was inundated by ocean, and then became a...
Inundated, there's a sea transgression. Inundation makes it sound like it's a big flood. It's not. This is like the inundation that happens like when sea levels go up a bit, and now Venice sometimes has water on the sidewalks, but like Venice isn't getting like a wall of water dumped on it and now it's just underwater. Right? It's a pretty slow process because hey, maybe building a city on a sinking island during a time when sea levels are going up, I don't know, maybe it wasn't the best idea.
I mean, they're getting to the point now where they're actively not letting tourists come in because it's contributing to the rate of like sinking. So
yeah.
A coniferous forest for a period of time, leaving the carboniferous layers, and then you went back to an ocean. So the different layers to them are due to, in their claims, due the changing environment over time.
Well, I mean, given that you can determine depositional environment, from the rock, and these evidently have different depositional environments, it's hard to conclude anything else, because a flood is a depositional environment, and you would only expect one kind of deposition in a flood, and specifically, you'd expect turbidite that's graded, which is not what we find at the Grand Canyon.
Dapper, you now have at least 3 Alabamians in your circle of people because Elijah Roberts from there as well.
What?
Yeah.
Okay. It's like an invasion. Is this because of Jackson Wheat or something? Someone else who lives like nearby? Because I guess he's in Louisiana, but not Alabama. But like,
okay, I was gonna say that. It's kind of perfect.
I mean, look, those are basically this. I'm kidding, they're not the same place. I will say that I had some really good catfish last time I was in Alabama.
Holy crap, that's about where I'm from. Holy crap. Birmingham, Homewood. Oh my god. Yep. I grew up over the mountains, so being that you're a Birmingham native, you'll know exactly what that means. If you go out on Highway 280, that's headed towards my neighborhood in Shelby County. So, oh my god, that is crazy. Small world.
But yeah, I had a lot of fried catfish and hush puppies.
Hush puppies.
Oh,
I love hush puppies.
Well, if environment on Earth has changed over time so dramatically, then why on earth do we find so many organisms that are identical today to their ancestors that are in the fossil record?
I mean, okay, but counterpoint, how can we find so many animals in the fossil record that aren't? Right? Like, you can't have both, right? Faunal succession is one of the things that first clued people in to the idea that, hey, maybe something weird's going on here. Like, maybe can't just assume that the same animals have been on Earth the entire time. So you don't get to have your cake and eat it too with that one. But also the fact is that we also have a lot of animals that do have a great fossil record, and we wouldn't predict that at all on the basis of special creation in a 6,000-year-old Earth. So we've got the fact that the rocks are fundamentally physically incompatible with being laid down in a single event, especially all in a high-energy event like a flood. We've got the fact that we do have many evolutionary transitional sequences, and we've got the fact that, while in some cases we do have morphologically conservative organisms like scorpions, we also have groups that aren't morphologically conservative, like mammals as a whole. Mammals as a whole don't look a whole lot like mammals in the Jurassic. Today they don't look like Jurassic
Wait,
mammals.
are you saying that animals change over time?
Yeah. In fact, the fact that some of them don't do that much doesn't mean that the ones who do it a lot don't count.
Oh, hey, Ugly German Truce is in the chat, so now I can make my terrible shield toad jokes.
That's just because German has the best animal names.
I gotta get that chart out to some people, because that
Yeah,
animal
I mean,
chart
it's like, hey, Germany was kind of like, we have like at max 5 names for animals, and that's basically it. We're not going to add any more. But we're going to call everything a variation on one of those. So like that raccoon, well, it's sort of like a bear, so we'll call it a Vashbar.
Yeah, exactly, because it's a little bear-looking thing and it washes its food, so there you go.
Oh, what is that, a bat? Well, it looks kind of like a mouse because it's small and furry and it flaps a lot, so it's a flattermouse.
It's a little snoot like a mouse,
Yeah.
so it's like a Shilkoita, yeah.
Schildkröte.
Ugly German Truth says, Vishanti, if you're so cool, then why do all your states have oven preheating temps during the summer? That's rich coming from someone whose basically entire continent is on oven preheating temperatures right now, so...
Ooh, ouch. Yeah. All right, here we go.
Where's the evolution? They did not evolve. They're exactly the same as they were in fossil form. But perhaps the biggest challenge for the secular interpretation of fossils is an event, if you will, called the Cambrian explosion.
Oh, okay.
It's the Cambrian explosion.
Hey guys, fun fact, the Cambrian explosion didn't involve a fireball with debris. That's not the kind of explosion we're talking about, but okay.
Oh, I will never stop singing that video for the history of the Earth and stuff. Yeah. It's so good. Just that whole video is so good, but the early part of it about cosmology and the early history of the Earth is 10 out of 10.
I should make a little video where there's just like a mine, like a sea mine, just sitting on the bottom of the ocean, and then it explodes, but rather than like flying out like shrapnel and whatnot, like Opabinia and Anomalocaris and like Picaya just shoot out because it's the Cambrian explosion.
It's the Cambrian explosion.
Of course, never mind the fact that, like, you know, the first mollusks are separated from the first chordates by like 30 million years. Just forget about that. It's all the same thing.
Details.
It's the same thing.
I really
Cambrian
need to clip
explosion
that,
name given
that
to
audio out so that I can use it in future videos.
I mean, if you need help, let me know.
Bill Vert's going, it's the Cambrian explosion. And then, oh God, what was the other one that he used that I quote like all the time? Hey, we can make a religion out of this.
I mean, I've already made a religion already, so like, you can have your competing religion, I guess.
We can fight over land.
So Ugly German Truth says, is there a photo of an explosion in space? It does kind of seem like it, because like it looks like there's stars, but I could also see those just being like sparks. And also, this fire is clearly not a fire. It looks a whole lot like they just took a regular old like Perlin noise texture, upped the distortion, and then like brought in another Perlin noise texture with a high distortion, and then just sort of like screened the two. Which, by the way, guys, in case you don't know, I'm now at the point where I basically see things in the real world as a combination of procedural texture nodes that I could use to recreate that thing. It's kind of annoying, actually.
You're seeing the Matrix, man.
Basically.
given not to an event necessarily, but the sudden appearance of life on Earth.
No, life on Earth predates the Cambrian explosion by like 3 billion years. That is extremely inaccurate. In fact, animals predate the Cambrian explosion by about 400 million years. So, and I think it's closer to 350 million, but still, by a long time, basically. Our first evidence of poriferans comes from hundreds of millions of years before the Cambrian explosion. And for those of you who don't know, poriferans is just a fancy way to say sponges.
Woo!
Which, despite what Carl Kirby, the pastor, might tell you, is not the kind of thing that your foot fungus is. Foot fungus is not an animal.
Poriferans, Bob SquarePants.
My goodness. But yeah, if you guys go back and watch the Carl Kirby series, he definitely said that the reason it's hard to get rid of Athlete's foot is because it's a sponge. And not because it's a fungus.
It's a fungus. What is going on?
No, he was adamant it's a sponge. It's foot sponge.
Okay.
He was just like,
I can make up stuff too.
yeah, I couldn't with that one. And his evidence for this was basically like he showed a few poriferans that kind of vaguely resemble mushrooms.
Source, I made it up.
Well, yeah, basically. All right, here we go.
So sudden, in fact, that it is called an explosion of life. This Time magazine article called it evolution's Big Bang.
Hey, you know how long the Big Bang took? There's no answer. It's still going.
Yeah.
It's still going.
It's going to be a long time.
There is no end point in particular for the Big Bang. It's just going to keep on going. So, like, I don't know if this is the connection that he really wants to be making. Although, I do love those derpy little Lucigenia down there at the bottom. Those guys are adorable. But
Look at those little guys.
I know, they're so cute. And this is from the point in time when we were right about which way Hallucigenia was standing. It stood on the 2 feet, not on the spikes. Here we go.
They say,
yeah, Sir Equinox points out ringworm, not a worm. Correct. Also correct.
new discoveries show that life as we know it began in an amazing biological frenzy that changed the planet almost overnight.
And my source is Time magazine, which is famously not a scientific peer-reviewed journal.
Yeah, maybe Time magazine's not the right place to get this, because the thing is, the Cambrian explosion is a tens of millions of years long thing, and while we like to, in our imagination, compress it down into a single thing, like the Cambrian, it's actually a progressive thing. It has multiple stages, and you don't get all of the modern phyla until pretty much the end of it. In fact, you don't actually get all of the modern phyla until the Ordovician, because Bryozoa doesn't show up until the Ordovician, and that's a whole phylum on its own. So, yeah.
It's called the Cambrian explosion because it occurred in the geologic era known as the Cambrian.
The Cambrian, okay.
Cambrian, I think you're putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable.
Just a little bit. Also, I want to point out that when he's all like, oh, we don't have any transitional scorpions, it's at the bottom left of this list of fossils. Looks suspiciously like a transitional scorpion. Weird that.
The Dimetrodon.
Oh, yeah.
Little Saley boys.
Yeah, or is it an Edaphosaurus? Because it's not very well drawn.
Ooh.
Edaphosaurus is like, what
Let's
is...
say it's a Dimetrodon because I like little Saley boys.
Okay, but Edaphosaurus also had a sail.
Okay, I just like all Saley boys.
So Spinosaurus, Edaphosaurus, Dimetrodon.
Yes.
Okay.
Before this point in the fossil record, all we find is bacteria.
No, wrong. We find sponges and potentially jellyfish, as well as other either stem bilaterians or in some cases crown bilaterians and the Ediacaran period. That's just a lie. And we've known about the Ediacaran animals for several decades now. I'm pretty sure when this was done, that was already a thing that we knew about. So it is simply incorrect to say that we don't have fossils of animals from before Cambrian. We have...
Dapper, are you ready for this one amazing shitpost I'm about to drop on you?
No, probably not.
Who lives at the bottom of creation is stratigraphy, sponges, and diatoms.
Amazing. Might have to work on the syllable structure fitting a little bit better with the tune.
Yeah.
But,
well, if he's putting Cambrian in there, I can
good point.
mess around.
All right, here we go.
That bacteria dating back like 3.9 billion years.
Also, I like how he says sudden appearance of invertebrate phyla, as if the phylum Chordata, the phylum that includes all vertebrates, didn't also occur in the Cambrian. Like, when does he think it came around? I don't know.
bacteria, 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 in all these layers of fossiliferous rock. Then suddenly, and without explanation, boom.
Now, that's actually a curious thing for...
Suddenly.
Like, how does the flood explain that?
It doesn't.
Where were all these bacteria? What were they doing before the flood?
Well, you see, there were bacteria all at the bottom of the flood because that's where they lived, in the water. They were already at the bottom of the seafloor.
Okay, here's a problem with that. Those bacterial fossils are primarily stromatolites. Stromatolites are photosynthetic. Light doesn't reach the bottom of the ocean.
Well, you see that the ocean trenches weren't as deep back then because he hadn't pushed down the valleys and lifted up the mountains that made the floodwater assuage.
Of course. Oh, and Crease... Sorry. Guys, I'm a little under the weather. I've been just tossing back... what do you call these? Cough drops. And I spent pretty much all day yesterday in bed. I'm going to be going to bed after this, so my apologies for somewhat frequent
This is
coughs.
why I'm filling so much airtime with inane bad humor.
Yes, at my request. But Chris Reese has just joined the channel at Tetrapod. Welcome, Chris Reese. If you have trouble getting into the Discord server, let me know. All you really have to do is connect your Discord to your YouTube. It should be automatic. If it's not, or if you have trouble figuring out how to do that, let me know. The easiest way to do that is to hit me up on Twitter. And everyone, drop in some tetrapods to welcome in Chris Reese.
No, I'll drop in Mothra.
I mean, that's okay too. Although Mothra is not a tetrapod. Godzilla probably is, though.
I like Masuda.
Well, you know what?
She's pretty.
Interestingly, both me and Ra independently came to the same conclusion that Godzilla, as typically just portrayed in Japan, probably more of a therapsid than he is a dinosaur.
That's convergent media evolution.
There you go. So
yeah,
here we go.
In one brief period of time, we find the vast majority of invertebrate phyla just appear out of nowhere. So sudden that it's called the Cambrian.
By the vast majority, he basically means all of them but bryozoans. But here's another fun fact. There's also a number of invertebrate phyla that just don't have a fossil record. They're like microscopic things, like Rotifera. Basically, it doesn't have a fossil record except for like one Cenozoic lake deposit. Has a few little mouth parts for rotiferans. So, but yes, over the course of about 40 million years, most of the phyla appeared. That's true.
Cambrian explosion, an explosion of life on Earth. Well, Darwin himself was deeply troubled by the sudden appearance of life in the Cambrian.
Who cares what Darwin thought?
Exactly.
He's not the Pope of science.
Nope. He's not even a saint in science. Science doesn't do that.
An appearance that he called an inexplicable mystery. In his book on the origin of species, he said this about the Cambrian explosion. There is another.
This is from 1869, which, let me just help you out, that's at least 150 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Science, surprisingly, has progressed since 1869.
Well, I think this comes down to the idea that creationists are fundamentally, obviously, very religious. And they're in a group of religions that has a big emphasis on revealed knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And so they tend to, I think, import that idea onto other areas. They'll say,
they do.
Well, science must also be big into revealed knowledge. Who revealed evolution to the world? Well, Charles Darwin. Therefore...
Yeah, because, I mean, at the end of the day, it's whoever said it first was the correct one.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way they treat him. It's like, well, he said it first, so if he was wrong, then everything he said was wrong.
Right. The fact is, though, that no one treats the origin of species as holy writ. There are no debates in evolutionary biology where someone says, but you see, in chapter 8 of Charles Darwin's The Origin of the Species, he said this. Then someone else says, but in chapter 12, he said this other thing.
I have you now.
Because that's how, a lot of Christian theological debates go. Which, when your basis for your theology is in fact a book, then that makes sense that you would use the book to argue your conclusions. But that's not how science works. The only reason the book is significant is because it's historically significant. It's what kicked off the whole ball of evolutionary biology. But as
Yeah.
far as its
And
actual contents, meaningless.
I really honestly did mean Pope Ugly German Truths, because the idea of like God is kind of nebulous, and a prophet, it's a little bit touch and go, but popes are a tangible human that claims to be, or is claimed to be, like the head of the whole shebang. So that's how a lot of creationists treat Darwin, as if he's the head of the whole shebang and you cannot question him.
Vishanti,
His word is law. And it's like, no,
you say that
that's not
the
how science
prophets are kind of nebulous, but I mean, talk to the Mormons. They claim that
Yeah.
they've got a prophet right now, right there. You could go
Oh, well,
poke
they're
them in
not
the face.
Christians. Blah, blah, blah.
Well, I don't care if they're Christians or not. They're a group that has a person that they say is a prophet.
Yeah.
And they're also
I mean,
really big
that's
into
just-
revealing.
Evangelicals are like, they're not Christians, except when one of them runs for public like office, like president, and then suddenly,
When Mitt Romney's running for president, he's Christian enough.
yep, I'm
Um,
looking right at you, Franklin Graham, because your website had all sorts of things on it about how Mormons aren't really Christian and they're following false doctrine and they're adding to the scripture by having their own books and stuff like that. And then weirdly, that stuff kind of got pushed aside when Mitt Romney became the Republican candidate. But I'm sure that's just convenient, like, coincidence.
DM Wing for $5 says fossils have to start appearing in the strata somewhere. By definition, there will be no previous fossils. So appeared out of nowhere is dishonest. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That is very true.
Yep.
Oh, apparently God Rules TV thinks that Victorian era buildings are a part of Tartarian culture, according to Fernando
So
Cadagai.
mud flood.
Yeah, he's apparently a mud flood guy.
Ugh.
How do you square being a mud flood while also being a Christian fundamentalist? Because I would think that the Bible would have to be part of like the post-Tartarian like cover-up, because it doesn't really fit with the mud flood version of what history should be. So that's a
I
weird
don't
combo.
even want to devote neural pathways to trying to reason that one out.
Yeah, every once in a while I get someone who's like, okay, how is it that you're managing to hold these groups of beliefs all together at the same time? And Mudflood plus fundamentalist Christian is one combination where I'm just like, I don't think that works.
Cognitive dissonance is a hell of a drug.
True. All right, here we go.
An allied difficulty, which is much more serious. I allude to the manner in which many species and several of the main divisions of the animal kingdom suddenly appear in the lowest known fossiliferous rocks. To the question why we do not find rich fossiliferous deposits belonging to these assumed earlier periods before the Cambrian, I can give no satisfactory answer.
And in 1869, that was very true. He could give no satisfactory answer. In 2022, it turns out that, one, we've found some of them, because at the time, the fraction of the globe that had been explored for fossils was a lot smaller. And two, the older rocks are, the more likely they are to eventually be eroded at some point, and therefore to have the fossils in them destroyed. So the older you go, the less likely you are to find fossil-bearing rocks. Period. I mean, there's a reason that it's basically impossible to find Hadean rocks on Earth. Not completely, but it's virtually unheard of. Why? Because they're the oldest rocks. I mean, it's really that simple. Why is it that around here, where I live, Cenozoic fossils outnumber Mesozoic fossils by a crazy amount? Well, in part, it's because most of the Mesozoic got eroded away. And the Cenozoic hasn't yet. So, there you go.
They just appear out of nowhere. Well, Darwin's imagined a tree of life that you see here.
That's... I mean, look, you know what? You label your axes, so at least there's that.
Oh, okay, sure.
Give them some... Look, I've seen so many charts that didn't label axes, and I'm just like, I don't know what this
Yeah.
is. And it's like, oh, everyone knows X is time. It's like, not always, it's not.
No.
In fact, in this one, Y is time.
Why is time?
Okay, but here's a question for you. Is Y or Z the vertical axis if you're doing a 3D plot? Now.
Oh.
Yeah. The answer is...
Tyler West in the chat asks, Dapper Dinosaur, should I even ask what the mud flood theory is? And to that I say, not unless you value the current quantity of brain cells.
Okay, here's the thing. I'm going to give it in like a few sentences. So it's the idea that up until like a couple hundred years ago or so, there was this worldwide empire called the Tartarian Empire. And they had high technology and they built many of today's buildings that you still see. And then some catastrophic event happened that covered most of their cities, which are still our cities today, in mud, which is why you see buildings with windows near the bottom. Because no one who might be in a basement might want the sunlight in that basement. That's impossible. Shut up. And therefore, then there was a big cover-up to erase most of human history and replace it with a fake human history that skips over the Tartarian Empire.
Okay, so wait, when was like electricity discovered and light bulbs become prolific?
I mean, electricity was discovered sometime in the 18th century, but light bulbs weren't invented, I think, until like beginning of the 20th.
Okay, so you're telling me that a bunch of buildings that were constructed before the proliferation of electricity have windows in the basement so that they can have light?
Yeah.
That's just too much to believe. That's just too much.
Also, Valkyrie Vision says, and basically the mud flood thing is brown people couldn't have done that. Yeah, that's all.
Yep.
That's like 90%.
Hashtag ancient aliens.
That's like 90% of alternate history. It's like,
Yep.
well, clearly people who aren't white couldn't do this.
God.
Is simply not supported by fossils.
I mean,
Tried to warn you, Tyler.
I'm gonna do it. Here it is. Transitional fossil slide.
That's all the yodeling you're gonna get from me today. Oh, goodness gracious.
Yeah, there's definitely no support for fossils for evolution in the fossil record. None whatsoever.
I mean, for the visually impaired, it's literally just a slideshow of transitional fossils.
Yep.
AKA fossils.
And it's dozens and dozens of them.
Dozens of them.
Yeah. Every fossil is at least a new genus. And I mean, it goes through a huge swath of mostly vertebrates because that's what people care about. Like, let's be honest. People care about things the closer they are to being human. That's why.
This is like no.
That's why there aren't a whole lot of like save the giant Congolese leech campaigns, but there are plenty of save the panda campaigns. Also, I don't know if giant Congolese leech is a thing, so if it is, I hope it's not in danger.
Is it related to the Mongolian deathworm?
I would hope so.
Awesome.
And in fact, Stephen Jay Gould, who we met previously, said nothing distressed
Who is
Darwin
also
more
not
than
the Pope of Science.
Yeah, Stephen Jay Gould, additionally not Pope.
Cambrian
Not
explosion.
Pope of Science, and not even a cardinal.
Rather than a slow and gradual accumulation of kinds of organisms, the fossil record shows what it shows is a sudden appearance of life out of nowhere.
No, it doesn't, though. It actually shows... I mean, I guess you could say the first bacterial fossils that we have aren't preceded by, like, pre-bacterial fossils. I guess that's true, but it's not even clear what that would look like. So maybe it is. Maybe there are parts of, like, really ancient rock that are, in fact, prebiotic, quote-unquote, fossils. But what would they look like? We don't know.
I
And
also
then
think I just lost some brain cells. Don Giovanni said, Dapper, I've seen mutters claim that European cities were also Tartarian and that cathedrals were power plant.
Well, I'll tell you what. Have them build a cathedral and then make it power something, and then I will believe them.
Oh my god.
Because there's...
Speaking of the unbeliever, so Stephen Jay Gould is the Martin Luther of evolutionists. Amazing.
Surprisingly good. I like the analogy. Here's another thing, right? Like, there's no chance that cathedrals are... Oh, I don't know. a bishop's parish church, which is sort of the definitional thing that they are. Yeah. Actually, it turns out that it doesn't need to be a big fancy church to be a cathedral. All it has to be is the actual parish where the regular person who is giving mass there is a priest, or not priest, is the bishop of the area. So, I've seen a cathedral that was an office rented in a middling floor in an office building in Singapore. I think that was a big
JS
grand.
is asking who's the John Calvin of evolutionists.
Maybe we haven't got that far yet. Or it's whoever was big on.
Probably Sagan.
I don't know. I think it has to be someone who's really big on orthogenesis.
Okay, so they can't just be like a cosmology or astronomy expert?
Well, the reason I say that is, orthogenesis is the idea that like evolution is predetermined. And if there's one kind of evolution that John Calvin would like, it's predetermined evolution.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah. In case you guys don't know, John Calvin was really big into literally everything is predestined.
Yep.
Yeah, and God probably hates you.
Slow and gradual accumulation of new species, but not new kinds. The kinds appear suddenly.
Remind me, did we have kinds defined for us in this video?
Nope.
No, we didn't. Okay.
Of course not.
Fossil record, all evolutionists can really demonstrate is that new variations of the same kind evolved through time. This is what the fossil record shows, not the evolutionary tree.
If you have enough variations on a kind, does that then become a new kind?
Good question.
I'm thinking about cetaceans.
Yeah, actually, so here's
specifically.
That's an interesting one because you guys might know who Todd Wood is. I haven't really covered him, mostly because he's like the reasonable version of young Earth creationism, where he's basically like, oh yeah, no, evolution has plenty of evidence. I just think I can overcome it. And I'm just like,
okay,
all right, man, have fun with that. Keep working on it. Like, if you're not going to sit here and be like, oh yeah, no, all of this evolution stuff is just a lie. We all know that this is impossible because these scientists are lying about this. Or he's like, no, it all works. There's good evidence for it. You shouldn't pretend otherwise. I just don't think it's true, and I'm going to try and find out why not.
Okay.
Go for it. Be a rebel. I have no problem with that stance. But he also did a baraminological study, which is like the creationist version of phylogenetics, where they're trying to figure out what is a kind by basically just using evolutionary biology techniques. But he himself failed to exclude all of like the protocetids and ambulocetids from a whale kind when he was doing his cetacean baraminology analysis. So he said that while he doesn't think it's the case, he actually can't rule out the possibility that all cetaceans, including Ambulocetus and Pakicetus, were, four-legged land animals. He can't rule them out being in the same kind as whales. And at that point, I'm like, okay, well, if a blue whale and Pakicetus can evolve from the same animal, I don't see kind as this big barrier. Because those are some pretty radically different animals. So, yeah. He's basically like, oh yeah, whales could totally have evolved from land animals. Okay. I'll take it.
Thanks.
Yeah. So.
As Darwin envisioned, starting with one organism and leading to more and more organisms, more and more kinds of organisms. The kinds of organisms appear out of nowhere without any evolutionary.
Now, if you can't figure out what a kind is, how could you say that one has appeared? Oh, right.
Well,
it's because you couldn't.
My best guess for them is because of reasons.
Yeah, well, yeah, because reasons is. And they actually have a thing in creationist literature. If you look at their like so-called technical literature, where they have this fancy name for it, the cognomen, which basically is when you look at these organisms, do you give them the same basic name or not? And if you don't, then they're probably two different kinds. I'm not kidding. This is why they have what is it? Antelopes, sheeps, goats, and then like the bovinae, like the cattle and the bison, musk oxen, right? Which aren't separate subfamilies within Bovidae, but they have them as separate kinds on their kinds list.
Okay.
And their reason is people think of them as different kinds.
Oh.
Yeah. There's no technical analysis that was done. They were just like, people don't think of them the same thing, so we're not going to say they are.
Wow, that's scientific.
Yeah. Much rigor.
Yeah, much rigor.
So,
Very biology, wow.
yeah, exactly. It's just like, okay, guys, thanks for just taking that mask off and being like, we don't care about data.
It's like, oh, we just let lay people define science now. Okay, that's cool.
Yep. I guess
Experience, you don't need that.
on the bright side, it does mean that there's more of a clean animals for Noah to eat. They don't all have to go extinct immediately.
Right.
Because, bovidae basically sums up the clean animals. It's not
Right.
actually true, it's actually ruminata, but most of
Yeah.
those are bovids. Like, what are you going to go find a musk deer and go kill that? They're Hebrew people in the Middle East where musk deer only live in, like, Southeast Asia? Probably not.
This is why but again, where would you classify giraffes?
Clearly clean.
Well, I mean, I know they are. A lot of people don't.
Look, cloven hooves chew the cud.
Yep.
Now, there is
I mean, they're legit.
there is the stricter rule where there's like a certain number of genera that are traditionally considered clean, and there are some very, very, like, not conservative in the sense of like that group of Jewish people who identify themselves that way, but conservative in the sense of like not interested in lots of innovation.
Yeah.
We'll just go with like, those are the ones that we know are good, so we're not going to be risky about it.
Yeah, and I mean, I actually put that question to, not question, I actually put this idea to like a rabbi that I was talking to one time, and I was like, I mean, giraffes are kosher. And their response was, well, yes, but there's not any real precedent for any communities eating them on a regular basis, so
Maybe if one of those like hunter-gatherer groups in Africa decides to convert to Judaism, they can keep eating giraffes.
right.
Which doesn't seem like...
Imagine the kind of like spit roast that would make. Like, can you imagine just a huge ass neck on a like rotisserie?
I mean, I would actually just cook the neck and head separately.
Well, yes. I mean, you could just take the neck. but
Actually,
I'm just saying.
each limb and the neck could be its own like spit roast rotisserie. All right, here we go.
History.
We are way off.
And then
the
today,
weeds.
Yeah.
all we see is different variations of those kinds that have developed.
Again, unless you can define kind, it doesn't mean anything, buddy.
Well, the different interpretations of the fossil record can be shown this way. Evolutionists say that fossils show that organisms evolved over long periods of time and were buried in watery sediments through slow and gradual.
Well, not just watery sediments, and not always slow and gradual,
Be
but
mud.
there's also like windborne sand or ash that falls right out of the air. Like if
Oh
you
yeah, ash is a good one.
go to ash beds, which I think is in like the West Midwest. I don't know off the top of my head, but it preserves a lot of like I think Miocene, like rhinos or something, because rhinos come from what's now North America. They then went over into Asia and Africa, and then went extinct here in the Americas, which actually happened to a lot of animals. Happened to rhinos, it happened to horses, happened to basically camelids.
And then horses came back.
Thanks, Spain. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, well, I know you like brought smallpox and stuff like that, but you also gave us horses, so let's see this.
It's all
as an
even.
absolute win.
Hey, the New World brought the Old World syphilis.
This is true. It's the least we could do. But we also gave them tasty food like maize and tomatoes.
Okay, but also a lot of Old World crops are now New World staples.
True.
Like wheat, for that matter.
Also, imported to the New World, cannabis.
There you go. Apples, too.
Yeah.
So if you ever use
There you
like an apple bomb, have the Old World thing.
There you go.
All right, here we go.
Gradual processes.
Oh, DM
Is
Wing
that-
is asking, does that mean lobsters are edible under Levitical laws? That
No.
They are not.
They neither have fins nor scales.
Correct.
Although, as we already talked about, I think the fins thing is entirely superfluous.
Yeah, it's kind of redundant.
But whatever. You never
Yeah,
know. Maybe
it's
you'll
fine.
someday find a no-fin scaly
Honestly,
fish.
there is a very, very rare possibility that it's going into detail to exclude like water snakes. Maybe
Oh,
because
okay, that could
those
make
do
sense.
have scales, but hey.
That would make sense. And they'd probably be termed fish at the time. Yeah, okay.
I mean, I know they had words for serpents and stuff, which, lived on the land, but maybe there was a slightly different idea about snakes for the water. I don't know.
Yeah, that actually, I kind of like that one.
Yeah.
Also, I've seen a lot of ocean snakes in my time. My goodness.
I've seen a lot of snakes in lakes and rivers growing
actually
up
seen
in
fewer.
Alabama.
When I
Freaking
was
water moccasins, man, those are serious.
when I was in the Persian Gulf, it's like I couldn't look at the water without seeing.
Ugh.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like I was going to get in the water.
Vadim Smovsky Radichenko, I think I messed that up, says no fins and scales like water snakes. See?
Yep. I mean,
We're on the same
Vadim's on your
wavelength.
side. All right. I'm not against your
Vadim.
side either. Just like, that makes
Hey,
sense.
do that.
All right, here we go.
At what the fossils show. The biblical view of fossils would argue that fossils show that organisms appear suddenly.
Fernando Catechai says, do all aquatic animals taste like fish?
No.
Yeah, so it's just no. Some of them have certain similarities in taste if they're from the same area. And that's just from, like, taking in the same kinds of chemicals from the water. But, like, yeah, things like clams don't taste much like fish, or I don't think squid tastes much like fish.
Oh, I just got roasted. Bo's in the chat says, dolphin bastards.
Yeah, okay. That's a...
That is fair, and I cannot believe I didn't think of that.
Dolphins...
I just don't think of dolphins as being, like, Mediterranean creatures for some reason. My brain just
They very
refuses
much
to
are.
put them there. And I'm like, yes, they very much are. So.
In fact, actually, it's one of the little things that I don't talk about a whole lot, but it comes up every once in a while about the flood, with like, oh, the diversification of kinds after the flood. It's like, okay, we need to get all the modern whales in the Mediterranean, and if they're coming from like Ambulocetus, like Todd Woods says, that's a lot, and we get them pretty fast because we have Roman accounts of them hunting basically all the identifiable species that we have today in the Mediterranean. So yeah, a bit of a problem. All right. Also, I've never tried dolphin or whale, but you can get it in Japan.
Not surprised.
Yep, Japan still whales commercially.
Loves seafood.
Yep, and they still whale commercially. Although they are still technically, according to them, following the treaty they signed that says that you can't whale except for commercial reasons, with a few exceptions for like ceremonial purposes from like various indigenous groups. And basically, they just take a lot of measurements of the whales and then butcher them. So it's meat. It's like the different. I mean, I guess to some extent, I have said the difference between messing around and science is careful note taking.
I mean, that's what Adam Savage said. The difference between science and screwing around is writing it down.
Yep. So,
Yep.
And he's basically right. So I guess technically they're doing science. I feel like it's not strictly necessary science, but what do I know?
I mean, how else are you supposed to measure stuff like their liver?
Why do you have to?
I mean, science. You need to measure livers sometimes, right?
I feel like the more important thing would be for the whales to continue to exist in the long run.
There's more of them out there. They're fine.
Oh, okay.
And were buried rapidly in water sediments during Noah's flood. The question is, what does the evidence best support? What does the witness of fossils say?
Evolution.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
let's summarize the case of the fossils. Do fossils support evolution? No.
Yes.
Yes, they do. We already saw that.
The sudden appearance of life in the Cambrian
He's still going with Cambrian. Awesome.
strongly against an evolutionary interpretation. The tremendous absence of transitional forms is a tremendous challenge
The transitional forms we've been looking at this whole time.
Right.
to the
Yodeling in the
evolutionary
distance.
interpretation. The abundance of living fossils, the out-of-place fossils.
Which you never gave us actually an actual example of an out-of-place fossil.
Yeah, and we had that whole discussion about how artifacts can be out of place, but fossils?
Yeah.
Fossils all argue against Darwinian explanations.
No, none of those. All of those things either don't exist or do not argue against evolution in any way. In fact, the only thing I could say exists is the abundance of living fossils, which the living fossil term is arbitrary, right? Like, you could call humans a living fossil because look at how many mammalian traits they share with, like, Jeremiah from the Jurassic. I mean, yeah, that's true. They have incisors and canines and premolars and molars, and they don't have a coracoid bone, just scapula, and all these great things. It's like, yeah, okay. Basically anything can be a living fossil as long as you're broad enough. And the fact that kind of selection. Stabilizing selection. There it is. The fact that
Yeah.
stabilizing selection exists is a prediction of evolution, not a problem for it. But you know what? We're going to take a quick break because my water is out, and I want to make it in. Right? Because if you're out of water, then you fill water back up, and now your water is in.
Yes.
Or maybe English is just stupid when it comes to prepositions.
Maybe English shouldn't have mishmashed like 6 other languages.
Probably not. Although actually,
Hmm.
so, there's all sorts of weird things like you're on an island, but you're in a state.
Hmm.
Why?
Well, because islands really don't have borders the same way that we consider states have borders. Maybe. I'm just
Maybe.
coming up with ad hoc stuff. You know what? Let's just take a break.
Okay. All right, we are back. And I want to say thank you to Inkboy, who for €2 said, AIG is a sack full of schlongs. Now sip on water. Okay, thank you.
Delicious.
Yep. I also just, recently, by recently I mean in like the last 30 seconds, had a revelation about how to do something in Blender that I thought was impossible, and now it's not. So I'm going to try it. Not to talk about that, because it's not relevant. But it's weird. Anyway. We are back. Guys, whenever I come back from a break like this, I always remind you, there is a channel membership. We already got a new member, Chris Reese. Thank you very much. There's also a Patreon. Both of those really, really help out. They're the reason the channel exists. They're also the reason that overall I think 2022 is going to be the first year the channel actually makes money instead of losing money. So that's a plus. So if you want to keep the channel on a money-making trajectory, then please consider that. If you don't want to, you can't afford to give monetarily, just like and share the video. Actually, do that anyway. That really helps too. All right, Shanti, ready?
Yep.
All right, here we go.
I'm ready.
Well, although Darwin hoped that further fossil hunting would eventually prove his theory true,
Well, demonstrate, but he was right about that.
here we are, 150 years later, and those intermediate forms, those transitional forms, have not been found.
I mean, I could restart the slideshow, but I won't.
The periods of time before the Cambrian have never been found. And believe me, they are looking.
Wait, what? There are no Precambrian rocks? Did he just say that?
What?
I-
Excuse me?
What just happened? The times before the Cambrian have never been found. Okay, buddy. It's not like the majority of the Earth's rocks or anything.
Oh, snap.
What is-
I think something is burning in my oven. Give me 1 second.
Uh-oh.
Oops.
Well, let's hope nothing burns. Let's hope that Vishanti's place doesn't burn down. Here we go.
Today, the biggest road to fame as an evolutionist, as a paleontologist, is to find those transitional forms.
I mean, true.
And they have been scouring
Welcome back.
Now,
the
it
globe.
turns out if you melt cheese too much and it falls onto like the warming apparatus of your oven, the next time you cook, if you haven't cleaned it out, it starts to smell like burnt food.
Yes, I'm familiar with this.
Yep.
Yeah. I think I call it the droopy pizza effect. Where they're like,
Yep.
hey, put this pizza directly on the rack, and then you do and it droops. It's like, well, thanks, guys. Anyway, here we go.
for them. But here we are, 150 years later, they're no closer to filling in Darwin's tree of life than they were when he originally drew it.
Survey says,
Yeah, that's not even close to true. Also, I'm sorry for all the little coughs and throat clearing, guys, but like I said, I had to use a lot of willpower to just get out of bed for this, so it is what it is.
Do fossils support the biblical flood?
No.
Yes.
Not even close. Laterally continuous strata. I mean, until the strata end, which they do. And strata are always laterally continuous over some extent.
I know they were.
Yeah, I have, okay, sure. Laterally continuous strata are a huge win for the biblical flood, I guess. Not really, but okay.
Yes, they do. The lateral continuity of strata is a monumental body of evidence for the global flood.
Except that basically none of them are flood strata, so, try again. I don't care how laterally extensive your slow deposition shale is. It's not evidence for a flood, because it's slow deposition shale. Icarus says, does Dapper Dino have the bird flu? I mean, the dino flu? I actually don't know. I think I might have some mild food, actually. Yeah, because it happened directly after eating some food, and I was something like, oh, I don't feel very good at all. And then I just went to bed, and then that was on Thursday, and I basically spent maybe 6 or 7 hours of the next Thursday, Friday, and today out of bed. Valkyrie Vision for $9.99 says, I think she meant Vishanti, please do the
thing.
Yeah, I think she wants the yodeling.
Oh, yodeling, I will consider it.
Aw, she paid $9.99.
You have to show the slideshow though.
Okay, I'll show the slideshow. Here we go. Where is it? There it is. Here we go. On screen.
Okay, that's all good. Just one phrase.
There we go. There it is. That is
I hate
apparently
myself.
That's apparently $10 worth of yodeling.
That's $10 worth of yodeling.
If Valkyrie Vision had like super chatted like 100, would you go through the entire slideshow? Vishanti,
Answer unclear. Escalator.
okay. Vishanti's considering because she realizes that it's not really going to her.
It's more just like, do I want to yodel for like 6 solid minutes? Like,
You might for $100.
well, maybe.
Okay, here we go.
The abundance of marine fossils,
Since the ocean is one of the best places to lay down sediments, it's not surprising that ocean fossils are a huge portion of fossils. That's true under both ideas. It's not a discriminatory thing.
highly preserved nature of fossils,
Also, basic taphonomy indicates that there's a lot of ways that fossils can be highly preserved, but there are also a lot of fossils that aren't that well preserved. There are a lot of fossils that are fragmentary, show extensive like scavenging, being broken up post-mortem or perimortem, I guess. I guess perimortem wouldn't count for the preservation, but still, it's not all perimortem. A lot of it's post-mortem too. So like, there are highly preserved and non-highly preserved fossils. And I don't see a reason why not having a flood would mean that we shouldn't have any highly preserved fossils.
and those mass mortality beds of fossils all argue for a global flood model of fossil origins.
No, because local catastrophes occur. So in order for you finding a catastrophic event in the fossil record to argue for that being a global catastrophe, you would have to find evidence that it couldn't be a local catastrophe, which we do know occur, but we don't have any actual verified instances of a global flood. However, we do know the kinds of things it would likely leave behind, which is, like I said, a globally correlated turbidite deposit that's probably going to be highly graded, which is not what the fossil or not what the geological record of Earth shows at all. So, I mean, this is.
I mean, it's like, imagine the last time there was a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico that definitely affected the very tip of Argentina.
Yep.
So it's just like saying if you find evidence in the Badlands of this particular event, oh, well, that affected everywhere. No, it didn't.
Yep. That's not how that works.
And
Plus-
like the only times that we tend to find globally effective things is stuff like volcanoes going kaboom.
Right, that's another thing. It's a lot of the mass fossil graveyards aren't caused by the same thing. Like some of them are ash falls, some of them are tar pits, some of them are because of drought in windborne sand. I mean, good luck explaining how a drought-caused mass fossil graveyard is the result of a flood.
Hey, I live near some tar pits.
You do. I live farther, but still probably closer than most of the people here.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
The fossiliferous strata does make up a record. It is a fossil record.
Hey, look, it's that time that he said hadn't been found right there on his picture. Thanks for debunking yourself, buddy.
Oh,
Amazing.
God, you just have to wait long enough and they'll own themselves. It's
Right?
just poetic, really.
Complete with fossils, at least one of which is definitely an animal.
Wait a minute. He said we didn't have any Precambrian rocks, but fossils are found in rocks.
Yeah, in Precambrian rocks, right here according to his graphic.
Error 404.
Right?
record, but not a record of life on Earth over hundreds of millions of years, as argued by evolutionists. Despite the abundance of evidence to support the event, where you side on this debate may ultimately be determined by where you place your authority of truth. Do you
See, and that's exactly the problem. Oh my God. Authority is not how science is done, you religious dude.
Chris Reese says, unless they want to argue the iridium layer at the KT boundary was from the flood, in which case, press X to doubt. Yeah, that's not a good point that we haven't really talked about, is floods don't cause iridium layers, especially not in the middle of the flood for some reason, or at the end of the flood, because we have two competing flood models.
So, what's a real good source for an iridium layer, by the way?
So there's two sources really for iridium layers. They cause different types of, or not different, they cause very different levels of iridium spike. One is a large asteroid impact, which can cause a iridium spike worldwide of a very high iridium concentration relative to background. Also, extensive volcanism can also cause a less noticeable, but still very much present iridium spike.
So this is why Kent Hovind thinks that, the flood was in part caused by a comet/asteroid.
You could go. A cold asteroid, though, that flash froze all the
Yeah, it was
maps.
a cold asteroid. It just punched through that solid dome. I mean, not solid dome firmament.
By the way,
To say the Bible's literal until it's not.
I run the numbers on how much heat that asteroid would introduce. It doesn't matter how cold it is; it's going to roast everything alive. Yeah, it's not an option. But basically, the KT boundary iridium layer, it's been tested whether or not it can be explained by volcanoes. The thing is, even the volcanoes that pretty continuously throw off some of the most iridium, like the Hawaiian volcanoes, they're still like 5 or 6 times less iridium than you would need to get the kind of iridium spike that you see at the KT boundary. So it's really, unless it was like every volcano constantly going off for like hundreds of thousands of years and then no deposition during that time anywhere other than the iridium, it's not a realistic possibility.
Sorry. DM Wing says maybe it was a very slow impact.
Yes, that is of course how interstellar or interplanetary objects flying through space work.
See, if it punched into the firmament, which in Kent Hovind's brain was like an ice ball dome thing.
Oh, it lost some of its
slowed it
energy.
down,
Yeah,
like a lot.
The firmament is like a bulletproof vest for asteroids.
Yes, it slowed it down. It's Kevlar.
Okay.
It's like it's ice Kevlar.
Okay. Sure, why not? We'll go with that. There's certainly no math we could do to check on that, and I'm sure it wouldn't be ridiculous.
Nah. You don't need math. That's not in the Bible. Except with the times it is.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say
there. Off pi to 3.
Well, it does round off pi to 3.
And honestly, I'm fine with that, because if you live in the ancient world, how the F are you supposed to measure decimals to like any real degree?
Yeah, your normal
it does not. It is not practical to use decimals.
Yeah, your normal
when
level
you're
of
building
precision
stuff like that in the ancient world. Like, so people are like, oh, I can't believe you thought pi was 3. It's literally 3.1.
Right? It's about as close to 3 as you could reasonably get. And the thing is, like, your normal precision is about like a quarter of a cubit, which is like, what is it, like 20 centimeters or something? Like, okay.
Right.
When that's your level of precision, I can see why you're not going to go into too many more decimal points. And I mean, I would probably do the same thing,
listen, too. There are plenty of things that you can argue against, like, biblical history or accuracy or any of that other stuff, but just saying, well, pi was wrong, and just like, oh my god, it's 3.1. This is so stupid.
Yeah, it's not the best. The argument for the Bible is wrong about everything.
God.
Because even the like strictest literalists I know often assume that numbers are rounded. Like when it says that Jesus fed them 5,000, I don't know anyone who thinks it was exactly 5,000 down to the last individual.
Yeah.
No one I know thinks that. Even the most hardcore.
Rounding proves it's wrong.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe you could say, well, to be a literalist, you might as well be a literalist. Okay, but none of the ones I know do that, so don't use that as an argument.
Okay, but how many people are alive on the planet right now? 8 billion?
Something like that.
Well, it's 8.6.
Yeah.
Shut up, who cares? Like,
exactly.
It's not significant.
All right, here we go. We only got 9 minutes, 51 seconds.
Okay, we got this.
Place it with man's fallibility or with God's sovereign word. When the fossil record is interpreted correctly, it is clear and a monumental testimony to the terrible flood described in the Bible.
Wrong.
Not at all.
Science is not authoritarian, and it doesn't take its cues from, like, a person.
Does not.
And saying that it's interpreted correctly, what you really meant to say was interpreted it according to your interpretation of the Bible.
Oh, by the way, Ben Hovind and Smitty follows up on this, says, pi goes on forever. How much precision is enough? And Smitty says, even rounding to 3.14 is a concession.
All right.
Then he says, just round 3 to 5. I'm not going to do that, but yeah, there is no number that you could give that would satisfy someone who's going to say that, oh, pi needs to be recorded precisely. Because, hey, fun fact, my guess is that no scripture is going to stop to be written for all of eternity so that all the digits of pi can be recorded in that scripture. I don't think that's a reasonable idea, even for a god.
Digits did you need to account for in the Iron Age anyway? Like
1?
Come on.
Probably 1. At most. Only for large things.
The sorting of fossils merely represents the destruction of successive life zones or biomes by the rising flood water. Well, when the fossil record
The funny thing about that, though, is that we have the same environments all throughout the column. So, like, we have lowland marshes from, like, the Silurian on up. How come different animals are in them? How come there's no, like, boa constrictors in the marshes of the Mississippian? Why is that? Weird, isn't it? I mean, they should be able to live just fine there. There were other snake-like organisms. Odd.
is correctly understood and interpreted as being the result of a global flood, it's easy to see that there is no evidence that the earth is older than the biblical historical account.
Man, look, I get this. I think he's about to start going into his preaching, but it's like, look, if you feel like your entire theology and your sense of identity and your entire religion is going to be upended from the fact that humans descended from ape-like ancestors and that the earth is old, that's a you problem.
Yeah. Although it's
Like,
also
you keep trying to make this science's problem. Like, no, friend, that's a you problem.
the thing is, it's also a you problem that does not have to be solved by complete denial of most of science. Like, there are a lot of ideas that recover a Adam and Eve as historical figures while keeping basically all of common ancestry and the ancient age of the earth. I think it was Dr. Swamidas who runs not a blog, but a discussion website, I guess, called Peaceful Science. He recently wrote a book called The Genealogical Adam and Eve, in which he argues that there are a pair of humans who are genealogically the ancestor of all modern existing humans, but were not, like, the first ever members of their species, and that they entered into a covenant. And then you get, guess what? You get to recover all those doctrines you like.
And
Fun
it's
times.
just like, again, it's like if you feel like the evolutionary model and that Big Bang cosmology makes you feel super insignificant, I'm gonna be salty, but you might need an ego check. Because if, like, oh, but no, I'm the most important thing ever, and people are the most critical thing in the entire universe, like, bro, again, that's a you problem.
Yeah, and science is not here to console your ego. If anything, it's here to do the opposite.
Yeah, and it's if you don't like the fact that you are where you are in relation to the rest of the entirety of the existence. Again, that's a you problem.
Yep. All right, here we go. I think
Like,
this.
but my religion makes me feel special. Okay,
Right.
that's nice.
I think most
but
people's
science-
religions probably make them feel a little special.
Mhm.
At least. All right, here we go.
And that's fine,
Nope,
but
that's-
science.
Have fun with it.
Hundreds, in fact, hundreds of natural processes can be used to determine.
Okay, helium in the atmosphere. Helium is added to the atmosphere by radioactive decay. Ever want to know what an alpha particle is? It's a helium nucleus. Helium in the ground. It's literally the same thing. That helium is also coming from alpha particles. Meteor dust isn't at unusual levels. Buildup of carbon-14 is exactly as predicted. Human populations don't work that way. Real-world populations don't just follow an exponential growth rate. Human population or natural plutonium is a product of radioactive decay. So, okay, sodium in the sea. Hey, sodium in the sea gets removed from the sea, so its buildup is not a problem. Sediment in the sea. Sediment also gets removed from the sea. Erosion of continents. Continents are both built up and eroded, and also the erosion gets slower exponentially as you get lower and lower. Still not a problem. Earth's magnetic field fluctuates. Doesn't just constantly go down. Oil leaks in Earth. If the overburden can cap the oil well, then it can do so basically indefinitely. It's a well-known fact in oil exploration. Natural gas in Earth, same thing. Orphan radio halos don't super exist, actually. They do if you do something like have subsequent heating, which erases some of the fission tracks, but that's also obvious. Check for
Coral
that.
reef growth. Just because a coral reef is so many years old doesn't mean it's the first coral reef that ever existed and continued on to the modern day.
Yep, in fact,
Same thing with the
sorry.
oldest living plants.
Yep.
Just because you found a 4,000-year-old tree doesn't mean that that was the first tree that's ever, like, come into being, and that all trees must live 4,000 years, and that's the upper limit.
Also, there are paleo coral reefs that would have had to grow during the flood,
Yep.
and they grew to the size of mountains, which is not a possibility during a flood in a year. River delta growth. Rivers shift That's literally all it is. River shift. They don't always go to the
The
same
Nile
place.
has shifted many times.
Right? Undersea oil seepage. Same thing as oil seepage in general. Uranium in the sea. Things get washed out to sea. I don't know what to tell you. Rotation of spiral galaxies. Oh, sorry, neutrons and lead. I mean, they both exist.
Yeah, they exist.
I don't know what that's supposed to mean. Rotation of spiral galaxies. Hey, the spirals in spiral galaxies are pressure waves that are not actually collections of individual stars that are spiraling around. They would get wound up. Interstellar gas expansion. What about it?
What about it? But also, that's a physical process that does not set a limit on the age of the world, meaning Earth.
Right?
Like, he just went from earthbound processes to cosmic phenomenon.
Carbon-14 in meteorites. I mean,
Sometimes meteorites go through the atmosphere and they hit us, so...
Yeah, and if they're exposed to neutron radiation, then they might get some carbon-14, because that's how carbon-14 gets here.
Ah.
Decay of comets. Well, good thing that there are sources of comets, like the Kuiper Belt.
Yep.
Interplanetary dust removal. Well, I mean, there is most of it gone from the inner solar system, but also there are sources for interplanetary dust. Like those comets you were just talking about. Lifetime of meteor showers.
What?
I mean...
Lifetime of meteor showers. Is he talking seasonally, or yearly, or over millennia? Like,
I think he's talking about, like,
what are we
over
talking?
millennia. Like, the meteor showers that we see now won't be the same ones that we can see in, like, 10,000 years. Because, yeah, different
Okay.
comets will be there.
So that's kind of just rehashing the decay of comets. But, alright, whatever.
Peat bog growth. Hey, peat bogs come and go over time. Multi-layer fossils. There really are no multi-strata fossils. There are multi-laminate fossils, which is not actually hard to get. Hardening of rocks. Just, okay, sure. Rocks harden.
Okay, alright, well.
Decay of Saturn's rings. Hey, there are sources for new rings in the Saturn system.
It's almost like their gravity, like, breaks stuff apart if it gets close enough, and they spin around a bunch of times, and sometimes get sucked into the atmosphere. Weird.
It is almost like that.
Yeah.
Potassium in the sea, same thing as salt in the sea.
Yeah.
Internal heat of Io. There's this thing called tidal heating. Problem solved.
Right.
Leaching of chlorine.
Wait,
What?
you skipped Titan's methane loss.
Oh, actually, Titan's methane loss is actually one of the more mysterious ones on here. It does seem like Titan has a methane source that we don't know about. So that's the one where I'll say, yeah, that's an open question. I'm not sure it's sufficient on its own to overturn everything else. Radiogenic lead. I mean, lead is a decay product of several radiogenic decay chains, so, like, I don't know what to tell you. Niagara Falls. Hey!
Well, you know, Niagara Falls has definitely been around since the beginning of the planet.
Yeah,
so,
basically.
Yeah, you know.
Niagara Falls isn't as old as the Earth. Stone Age burials do sure exist. I guess that's
They do
true.
exist. People in the Stone Age buried their families, so, okay.
We have C4 Calarius. It's
Really?
calcareous. It's supposed to be calcareous.
Oh, I was like, what?
Yeah.
Ooze.
Well, I mean, that is what it's called. And yeah, it's a collection of slowly settling, mostly microscopic carbonate skeletons. It's actually a pretty big
Uranium
problem.
decay.
Yeah, uranium just decays. Oh no!
I can't believe things decay, therefore, young planet. Why?
Also, speaking of uranium decay, look into the Oklo reactor. Because the Oklo was a natural reactor that for a very long time was, as a result of coincidental natural processes, inducing fission in the uranium in the area, which resulted in a rock formation that looks more like nuclear waste from a human-made nuclear reactor than it does like a natural uranium deposit, specifically because of this. And also, for it to do that, then the laws of radioactive decay actually have to have been constant back then, as well as where we are now, which means that thing had a measurable age. And guess what? It was doing its reactor thing for longer than the Earth is supposed to have been alive. So not only does it...
We just speed debunked, like, 50 of these points.
Yeah. So yeah, not only is uranium decay perfectly in line, but also we have a formation that demonstrates that radioactive decay hasn't changed significantly in the past, and that the Earth is definitely older than 6,000 years old. Let's see what else he's got for.
I agree that, with Ledge Robert in the chat that says, for people who hate uniformitarianism, they sure love uniform rates.
Yeah, well, the thing is, they like uniform rates when it would be a problem for evolution, But when it isn't, then they're like, oh, look at all these non-uniform rates. Like, the Earth's magnetic decay is totally exponential, you guys. And you look at, like, actual rock
Tyler
records, and it's
Westy.
not.
I was so busy debunking this list. I didn't read the site chat. Tyler West says maybe Titan is lactose intolerant.
upper limit of the age of the Earth, and many of these conflict with the idea that the Earth is billions of years old, and they show a maximum possible age much less than is required for evolution.
I mean,
No, it just tells you that the natural phenomenon that you're using, like Niagara Falls, peat bogs, and coral reefs, don't take billions of years to do.
Yeah, they started
just take
after
a
the
few
Earth.
hundred to a few thousand, and that doesn't mean the planet is that old.
Yeah, all of these are basically the same argument as, like, the zit on my face is 2 weeks old, therefore I am 2 weeks.
I know, right?
Like, that's just not how things work. There can be things that exist on an object that did not begin to exist when the object began to exist.
Just, ugh.
Weird, right?
Eesh.
Well, there was a global flood, and the fossil record is again a monumental body of evidence to this event. There is no larger body of evidence for any specific event than there is for the global flood.
I would say that there is...
Go ahead and say what you're going to say. I'm looking something up.
I was going to say, I would say that there's a larger body of evidence for almost everything. There's a larger body of evidence for, like, the existence of Moses than there is for the existence of a global flood. And I don't think Moses was a real person.
Dude, I knew this guy was just... I was like, oh, you're quoting Joshua. Oh, I'm pretty sure that's not what that passage means. So I went and looked it up. The reason that it says these stones are a memorial, conveniently, he leaves out what the memorial is.
Were they stones that were actually put there as a memorial to a battle?
It says in Joshua 4, these shall be a sign among you. He didn't even quote the whole verse, by the way, which, shocking, I know. These shall be a sign among you when your kids ask later, saying, what are these stones? You will tell them, the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, when it crossed the Jordan, and the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall become a memorial to the sons of Israel forever.
Yeah, and didn't they actually stack the stones there?
I'm like,
Because if I remember correctly, they actually brought stones to the location to build a little stack of stones. It's not just stones that existed on the Earth.
There were 12 of them.
Yeah, one for each tribe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're talking about not even a natural formation of stone here.
Like, oh, you're gonna quote that verse, and you're not even gonna quote the whole thing. I just can't.
Hey guys, context is important,
Gosh.
right? You can't just take half of a Bible verse, interpret it in the most generic way, and then say that you've done exegesis. That is not how it works. Goodness.
Oh.
And yet they deliberately ignored the fact that the world was deluged with water and perished.
Nope.
Well, interpreting these rocks otherwise has been devastating. And I think
No one has it.
I know.
Not the science.
Look around you at how terrible the world is compared to what it was like 3,000 years ago. I mean, come on, man. The average is 30. That's terrible.
Yeah, it's been devastating to fundamentalist Christianity, maybe, but
Even then, I mean, that's another thing. Fundamentalism, when it started, fundamentalist Christians weren't young earth creationists. This was an option they chose after the fact. Like,
Yep.
if you look at the earliest fundamentalists, the ones who wrote things like the Fundamentals, they were not young earth creationists. Some of them were anti-evolutionists. But yeah, this is an importation from Seventh-day Adventism. I think it was a
Yeah.
tactically bad move.
neo dispensationalism, dude. It's gonna get you in trouble.
this is the biggest problem. Of course, by teaching evolution, they're teaching teaching young people that they're nothing but an evolved ape.
What does it mean nothing but?
Oh, I'll go with you later.
I feel like you don't have to consider yourself to be just the sum total of your ancestry. You can live your own life with your own ideals and your own activities and your own relationships. You don't have to just judge yourself based on just your ancestors.
Sounds fake.
I mean, then again, given that one of my ancestors did kill a British monarch,
Hey, that's awesome.
you know, there is some of my ancestry that I'm going to identify with more strongly than other parts, but still. Yeah, my many times great-grandfather was the sheriff who executed Mary, Queen of Scots.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Woo!
Yeah, I don't take a whole lot of pride in most of my ancestry, because for the most part, like, I've never met them. But that one, I'm like, yeah, that's pretty cool.
Based.
Yeah. All right, here we go.
That their life has no purpose. And I think it's one of the main reasons why we need to address this issue. But there's another reason why the problem with them reinterpreting these layers of fossiliferous rocks in support of deep time, in support of slow and gradual.
Friend. We didn't reinterpret them. We interpreted them. You, in fact,
Right.
reinterpreted them.
The first actual attempt to use rigorous science to interpret the rocks came away with the Earth is at minimum tens of millions of years old, and possibly infinitely old.
David B. 22585 says today I learned Mary Queen of Scots was executed by a ceratosaurus.
Yeah, that's some of the stuff they don't tell you in the mainstream history classes. All right, here we go.
Gradual accumulations. And that is because of what these rocks were always meant to mean.
They weren't meant to mean anything. They're just
Meant.
rocks.
They're just rocks.
Not everything has to be an intentional thing, buddy.
Well, I mean, to them, everything has meaning because it's supposed to point you towards God, specifically the God of the Bible, specifically the God of the New Testament, specifically Jesus, specifically... Just goodness gracious.
Yeah, I guess. Although, to be fair, in terms of those specifically, most Christians that I know of go with the whole, like, science and the natural world should basically point you to, like, monotheism. I don't really have much experience with how they justify even getting to monotheism. I suppose it's just more generally theism. But most of them wouldn't go farther than saying monotheism for the natural. Of course, compatible with their theology. But
Sure.
I'll go in there with... is that a defense? And say, they're not quite as ridiculous as that? A little bit more...
I feel like my experience in the Southern Baptist circles is skewing my perspective a bit.
Oh, it definitely is, because that is not the majority of Christians. That's a
Oh, I know that.
pretty small and rather radical group.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I do think I just disconnected for a second there, guys. Sorry about that, but that's a lot better than it was last time. So,
Now, we know why God sent the flood, to destroy the wickedness of the human race on the earth in those days. But if you look at it biblically, many times when God enacted judgment upon people, he used other things like plagues.
So they
Plagues
deserved it.
Mm.
would sweep out.
I like how it says plagues.
So is that to say that plagues are always a judgment, or just some of them?
I think you would probably say just some of them, and then not give you any criteria by which you can differentiate.
And now my corollary to that is, where did viruses come from?
Yeah, see, they give different answers. Some of them will say that, oh, viruses are, in fact, a design part of, like, the biosphere, and that the fall made them bad, but before they were just, like, good for you, in ways.
Okay.
They were just good for you. Just shut up. They were good for you. Basically, the main argument. I've also heard some of them say, well, like, oh, they were created at the fall, and then I also want to say, like, okay, so which among Noah and his wife and their children and daughters-in-law had which viruses? Just curious. Or which human parasites? Like, which one of them had, like, ringworm, and which one of them had, like, roundworms, and which one of them had syphilis, and which one had gonorrhea?
I'm gonna say they're probably gonna have to paint themselves into a corner with the former explanation, because there aren't as many places in the text that are explicit as they would like to believe, but one explicit part is that he finished creating actively on the 6th day. So you can't create something in the fall. That's just not a thing.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I mean, allegedly he created thorns at the fall, so take that.
Maybe it just there's a possibility narratively that thorns weren't really a problem. But now they're going to be a problem. Like, women apparently were able to have kids without pain, but now they're going to have pain, so...
Look, before the fall, women just had really, really, really wide hips.
I just popped them right out.
Yep.
Boop, there's baby.
Slide out, 3 seconds, process over.
Yeah, there you go.
Time to go get pregnant again. Alright.
out amongst the Israelites when they were in the wilderness. Snakes in one case. But he did it this case with a global flood. And I believe he did it this way, instead of by a plague, which would have left no lasting evidence. I believe that he did it this way.
Yeah, plagues do leave lasting evidence, although I will say they would leave less than a global flood. It is harder to detect a plague than a global flood. Fun fact, we can't detect a global flood.
To leave a memorial, a monument, if you will, to remind us of one thing, and that's just how much God hates sin.
Okay, but he did it in a way where no one coming to the geological record without already pre-concluding, yeah, I guess I'll go with that there was a global flood, would ever come to it and then say, oh yeah, there's obviously a global flood here. That's the problem, right? Like, oh, why did God flood the world? Oh, so to leave behind evidence. Well, okay, but he didn't. In fact, he left evidence of the opposite.
Yeah, and it's like so much that you're saying that hyper-evolution occurred. It occurred so fast that it looks like it was slow.
Yeah, that's another thing, right? Because most flood models involve ridiculous amounts of evolution. Oh well.
He wanted to leave an everlasting memorial to us to remind us just how much God hates sin. And when they reinterpreted the fossil record, they took that away. That important reminder away.
Yeah.
Also, science doesn't care about your religion, so...
Yeah, the closest we could get to a creationist interpretation of the fossils that predates, like, evolution would be, like progressive creation, which still involved deep time and didn't involve a global flood as a significant event in geology. And that did predate Darwin by a bit. You know, knew about faunal succession from before Darwin, and was usually a progressive creation model. So, the thing is, even that interpretation doesn't fit with his ideas. There was no young Earth creationist interpretation of fossils, basically as soon as fossils began being described in a systematic, rigorous way. Which also, by the way, it was fun yesterday to watch Gutsa Gibbon discover that technically Megalosaurus is supposed to be called Scrotum humanum, according to the normal rules of taxonomy. Technically, Megalosaurus is a junior synonym for Scrotum humanum, because originally the distal portion of the femur was all that was described, and it was described as a fossilized human scrotum of a giant human. So, yeah, watching her discover that fact for the first time was kind of amusing. Because it's one of those, like, background memes in paleontology, Scrotum humanum, but, like, it's pretty funny when someone first discovers it, and they're just like, oh my god. It's like, yep. Technically, the first dinosaur ever described was Scrotum humanum. All right, here we go.
Just how much God hates sin. And his hatred of sin has never changed. It's never changed.
Actually,
the church...
it has. Because there are things that used to be a sin that you don't think are sinful anymore. Weird.
The modern church has kind of softened God's nature. They talk all about God's love and don't talk about his hatred of not just the sin.
Maybe.
But
because people don't like being told that someone who is a cosmic, all-powerful being is a jerk.
That's possible. Although the Calvinists sure haven't softened on that. Maybe you guys should go hang
out
out with the Calvinists.
Haven't softened.
My goodness, they're still like, yeah, God almost certainly hates you.
Exactly.
But if you convert to Christianity, it means he never hated you in the first place.
Oh man, that's just retcon. That's the power of retcons.
Yeah. Oh, but of course, if you leave Christianity, then he always hated you the whole time anyway.
Exactly. Well, you know, if you left, you were never really, really part of it. So
exactly. Yeah, it's interesting. Calvinism. We're not going to go into debates about theology here.
The sinner. His hatred of sin has never changed. The God that destroyed that world by flood, that terrible event, killing all of those people, all of those plants, all of those animals, that is the God that we will appear before one day.
All right, guys, the rest of this is just going to be preaching.
And I just don't really think it's an exciting prospect to find out that there's someone who punishes animals and trees for some people screwing up.
Yeah, but Vishanti, they were evil trees.
Oh, evil trees? Gosh.
Yeah, they weren't even giving out their oxygen.
So I'm very confused that it's like, oh, God hates sin. We're not told specifically what they were doing. It just says their thoughts were evil
Continuously.
continuously. So he's upset about you thinking bad stuff. Were they doing bad stuff?
Well, I guess if
Like,
every thought
we're
of
told
yours is
that they were
evil.
violent.
Yeah, well, that's often evil.
Like, they're violent, but
Well, I mean,
what
according to
else?
Ken Ham, they were fighting. They were having gladiatorial combats between Carnotaurus and giants. I mean, that sounds
Oh my
that sounds
God.
evil, or like a really good show.
Oh
Or
no.
maybe both. I guess
God
could
hates
be.
gladiatorial games.
I mean, my guess is that most Christians, at least nowadays, would probably say that yeah, God isn't a big fan of gladiatorial games, at least if it's like to the death or something.
I mean, what if it was like humans fighting Nephilim?
Yeah, I don't know.
That'd be kind of cool,
Would be
honestly,
cool.
to watch.
I mean, I feel like you'd have to have like several humans against each Nephil.
Okay. What if the humans like all had a Makwa.
Well, still, if you're only reaching up to like the knees,
I mean, if you get their Achilles tendon, they're probably gonna sink down to your level pretty quick.
I mean, I guess, but I feel like the Nephilim would have like weapons designed for dealing with small opponents, like big nets and like a longish hammer that extends their reach to like
Maybe.
20 feet. So like you get within 20 feet of them and you just get crushed.
This would make an awesome video game.
It actually sounds a lot like some of the fights in like the Souls-like games.
Ooh.
Just fight a giant with a gigantic weapon that reaches across the arena.
Amazing.
And I feel like it would go about as well as most first runs of a boss in most of those games, which is to say,
Yeah.
you might survive one attack. Might. You're not going to survive the second attack.
But also, if they're big, they gotta be slower.
But that's true. That's true.
So, there's always a chance.
Yeah. Well, that's what we'll do. We'll do after this. We'll start work on our pre-flood Soulsborne, Souls-like game where you play as a
Excellent.
pathetic human who has to fight in a gladiatorial arena. That's just going to be a bunch of boss battles against dinosaurs and giants.
Sweet.
Boss rush Souls-like.
Sweet.
That actually does sound like a pretty good game, if I'm being honest.
I'm saying this would be cool as heck.
Yeah, it actually does. Okay, well maybe that's an actually good idea. You know, we can call it a Christian-themed video game, and all the Christians will buy it, no matter how bloody and disgusting it is. You slap the word Christian on it.
Yep.
You can see just how evil the pre-flood world was as you fight Carnotaurus and Tyrannosaurus Rex and giants and I don't know and behemoth and unicorns.
Yes, and Behemoth and Leviathan.
Oh, Smitty said, do I have to collect foreskins instead of souls? Well, no, because this was before the circumcision man was given.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's no reason to think anyone was circumcising.
Well, though to be fair, the designation of clean and unclean also hadn't been established yet. So...
Also true. That is also true. Yeah. I don't know. Then maybe. DM Wing just says for $5, here's some money. Thank you very much, DM Wing. I really appreciate it. All right, guys. Well, we're gonna wrap it up here. I might just go back to bed. I might just stay in bed for the rest of the day. I don't know.
It's legit.
Yeah, it's been a long weekend already. It's only Saturday.
I'm basically gonna eat a pizza and continue cramming in this melodic chant for tonight. So good luck, me.
I think I have a reminder set for your chant.
Oh, that's right. I think you do.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, we'll talk to you hopefully on Tuesday. Actually, we might as well talk about what's coming up. All right, so Tuesday, the 9th. Kentwood Bent, I think it's 89. Let's see. Then Thursday should be the first start of my 4-part Stephen Meyer takedown. Stephen Meyer is a dishonest hack, is what it's called, because it's accurate. That'll be on the Thursday the 11th. I have no idea about the 13th. And there you go. And from the 11th, then, basically the 11th, 18th, 25th, and 1st will all be Stephen Meyer takedowns, sequentially. So, I hope you like them. that's about it, guys. Thank you for coming.
I'm about to really just get myself into a lot of trouble, I guess, is not the greatest word for it. But people in the side chat are asking where I'm chanting. So in order to force myself to practice and not screw it up, I'm going to link it in the chat.
Oh, damn. There it is, guys.
Oh, I love stressing myself out. This is great.
Now you have extra motivation. It'll work out fine.
I have extra motivation, and yeah, I'm really jealous that Ledge Robert's getting Tex-Mex. So because you are in the Homewood area, I highly recommend driving to my favorite restaurant of all time, which is Sabor Latino, which is on Green Springs. And going in, not between the hours of 2 and 5, because they're closed every day between 2 and 5, but go in and get their cheese dip, because, oh my god, it's so amazing, and I wish someone would overnight me some. Hint.
Awesome. Alright, guys, well, I'll talk to y'all later, hopefully on Tuesday, right?
Woo!
There will be booze on Tuesday, that's the plan.
Hey!
Alright, bye, guys.
Bye!
Thanks for watching, but before you go, I just want to say a special thank you to my channel members and my patrons, especially those pledging $20 or above. Bob Knob, Work in Progress, Benthoven, Cynically Skeptic, Denny5252, Ian Chen, John Ackerman, Landon Knoll, Mabbity Babbity, McSpooks, Sphincter of Doom, The Venerable Bede, and Patrick Dennis. As you probably know, YouTube is a very volatile platform, and from month to month my income on the channel can swing wildly. But the people you see on screen are directly supporting so that I don't have to worry too much about that, and the channel can keep going as it is, and perhaps even improving. If you'd like to join this team, there are links below to join the channel or in the description to join the Patreon. The Patreon starts as low as $1 a month, and the channel memberships start as low as $1.99 a month. On Patreon, you can even get a discount for pledging annually. If you do decide to pledge, you'll get access to an exclusive Discord server just for channel supporters, as well as early access to all of my pre-recorded videos, often up to 2 months in advance. Higher tiers will unlock even better perks. Now, if the annual or monthly pledge isn't right for you, but you still want to support the channel, there is a merch store down in the description, as well as an Amazon wishlist, just for me. And if financial support isn't something you can or want to do, then if you still want to help out the channel, please just like and share these videos and make sure you comment on them. It really helps the channel out. Thanks again for watching.